Welcome back to another video, and today we'll be discussing my fall palette recommendations for 2024. Welcome back, and it's officially September, so we are doing my fall eyeshadow palette recommendations for this year, and I think this might have actually been because I have now been on YouTube, filming YouTube videos approximately 1 year, and I do think the fall eyeshadow palette recommendations from last year might have been one of my first eyeshadow recommendation palettes that I have done. Don't quote me on that because I do actually have to check my playlist, but anyway, I'm pretty excited, and we actually do have palettes from all three categories for this video, so we will have some drugstore recommendation, then I will talk about the high-end recommendations, and lastly I will talk about the indie palettes, because with the indie palettes those are I think the biggest pile that I'm seeing in front of me. But let's actually now get to the palettes that I have to show for this video. So before going to the palettes, disclaimer, how fall is where I live in. We have basically two parts. There's the nice part where it's colorful leaves, there's reds, there's yellows, there's green, and everything looks very beautiful. And then basically when we get to the halfway October, everything's gray, there's rain, there's a mist, there's sleet. It's basically all gray and black until we get snow, if we get snow. That has been the last couple of Christmas has been that we have gotten snow, but there's definitely also been very, how should I say, less snowy whole Christmas and winter times also during I think last 5 years. So that's kind of where I'm going. So that kind of forms the basis of this one. So basically you can either divide these palettes in the category that I would recommend them to the beginning of the fall when you have a lot of bright colors, or then to the end part of fall when it's just very grayish and everything's pretty muted. But anyway, let's actually get to the palettes, and now I have to actually reach out because I am apparently again not that prepared. Yeah. So let's start from the, as I said, are we on frame? I think we're on frame. From Drugstore. From Drugstore I had two palettes. So first one is a palette that I'm not sure is it available anymore, but this is a W7 Influence palette. And this is duping the Huda Beauty Empowered palette if you are not aware. And why I would recommend this as the fall palette is obviously because of the color story. So this is this sort of orange gold, there's a bit of these muted purple mauve shades. So I think for me this is really a palette that does scream fall, and all the looks that I get with this, they're generally something that always make me think about fall time. So from a drugstore bit inexpensive option, especially if you're looking for more of these orangey leaning fall toned looks, this is something that I would recommend. And also the golds in here and also the formula in this one is definitely the better formula W7 has done. Then I think a palette that I have said quite early also previously that is my ultimate fall palette. So this is the huge ByBeautyBay 42 pan Earthy palette, and let's see how are we gonna do. So if this doesn't scream fall, then I don't know what does, because this essentially you have the greens and then you have the sort of mustard, reds and oranges. So this is basically what I mentioned, that this is basically the beginning of the fall in my country. So this basically has all these fall shades covered in one. Is this huge palette? Yes, but I do think that this is one of the few bigger ByBeautyBay palettes that I feel is actually worth buying in the bigger format rather than buying the 16 pan ones, which I'm usually more a fan of, because this generally has the extended shades actually do offer something different compared to the 16 pan version, which doesn't have this sort of mustard and red and orangey shades. And for considering that ByBeautyBay constantly runs sales, you can actually get this, I think, with a pretty decent price, and I think the quality, especially for drugstore palettes, is pretty good with these ones. Next, let's get to then some high-end recommendations, and first is a palette that I have always said that is a half spring, half fall palette for me. So this is the Byredo Remebrance palette. This was a limited edition palette, unfortunately you can't get this anymore. But this is one of those that I have always said that basically if you cut it in half from the middle, this side is for the spring and this other side is for the fall. So it has this more sort of deeper orangey leaning, sort of deep brownish leaning looks. And this is a definitely formula, I'd say, for those people who want this more sort of a buildable, easy to blend high-end formula that complements different kind of lid types. Because again, the shimmers in this one are much more, how should I say, friendlier if you have a lot of textures on your lids. The quality of this is excellent, and it's really sad that this isn't available anymore, because I do think this is still one of the better Byredo quality, like better higher end palettes that I've generally tried, and I would much rather always say to try to buy these bigger Byredo palettes than buying their quints, because I do think you get better value for money with these big palettes. Then something that I do believe should be available still, so this is the this is the ABH Fall Romance palette. So this is actually named Fall Romance, which is actually like quite self-explanatory. I do think that this palette is actually, and I did give this quite a lot of praise last year when I got it, that this is actually a pretty diverse palette. So you get quite, I'd say, deep looks with this one, which again I do think fits the kind of fall vibes, and you get the more sort of neutral looks, you get greenish looks, you have a bit of like deeper purples here to also like bring bit diversity to your looks. And generally I do think this was my first like ABH palette that I tried in her like newer formula, and I would hope that they would come with more color stories in this newer formula, because I do think there's been an upgrade compared to some of their older palettes. And I'd say, like, for me especially, that if you like your really deep fall tones, fall looks, this is a pretty good option. Then I think a palette that goes for the category of this when I talked about the sort of end of fall period, so from halfway October when everything is pretty grey and muted. So this is the Dior, and this was the Smokey Essentials palette. So this was Dior's 9 pan that they released. I think it was in the beginning of this year, and this definitely for me goes to the sort of like October vibes when it's pretty grey. You have like a bit of like these sort of like reddish tones here, but again these are very like muted tones. And again, if you are more sort of, I think for subtle makeup, this is a good option. And I have always said this, the Backstage formula that Dior currently has in these palettes is very good. It suits quite well different kind of lid types. It's very effortless to work with, and this, I think, if anything like screams October for me, then this is one of those palettes. Okay, let's now then get to the biggest pile, which are my like indie palettes, and there again we have a lot. So this is a relatively new palette. So this is the Moira A Moment With You palette. So this is how it looks like, and this was actually like Moira's Valentine's release a few years ago, but I got this recently when the brand was launched in our country. And this again I think goes more for the like beginning of fall season. So it has quite of these deep leaning neutrals, but you have some greens, there's like a bit of a pink here, you have some yellow and oranges here. So this is again made like more of that like beginning of fall season vibes for me. I think for considering that how inexpensive, because these Moira palettes are around I think 26 or 25 euros. So considering how many shades and how good this formula is, this is something that I could easily also recommend if you're looking for like more inexpensive like indie brands that are also like, because I do know that Moira is generally like sold also, for example, in States in quite many like also local retailers. So if you have this palette or you've been eyeing it, I do think that for fall season this has pretty good color story going for it. Then a palette that some of you are probably gonna say that, wait, isn't that a summer palette? But I do think that if you are purely looking for like neutral tones for fall, this is actually pretty good. So this is the Glossgods Let's Get Nude palette. So this was released, this was their sort of neutral palette release, neutral gold summer palette release for summer, which we actually saw quite a lot from this year. And I do think that for fall, especially why I would recommend this is that again this goes pretty deep. So what I usually associate with fall makeup as compared to maybe summer makeup is that with fall you usually are in the mood for maybe some like deeper looks. And this is a palette that goes actually pretty deep. So the only like lighter shades are some of the mattes like over here. But a lot of the shimmers and also the rest of the mattes go pretty like deep, and you get quite like smoky looks with this one. Also I think the sort of burgundy purples in this one, depending a bit on your skin undertone, the shifts of them can, because they are the shiftier shades, the shift of them can bit vary, but for me these purples are also something that go toward, lean more towards brown, which again makes me think about more fall rather than actually like putting this as like a summer palette. Then I think one of my all-time favorite palette that again with I think the more like muted tones goes for maybe to the like end part of the fall season, but still. So this is the Blend Bunny Dollhouse palette, and this is how the beauty looks like. This is still my favorite Blend Bunny palette like that I have because just of the color story that this has. And again, this has like, you can see there we have this sort of muted green row, there's neutral row, you get a bit of an orange here, and also these pinks are quite, I'd say, like deep leaning sort of pinkier shades. So I do think that if you are looking for this sort of like muted fall season colorful looks, this is a pretty good palette for it, and the formula of this is impeccable. Blend Bunny's matte quality is like generally raved about, and I think there's a good reason for it. The shimmers in this one aren't as shifty and sparkly as maybe for example with some of the newer Blend Bunny palettes, but the shimmers are still very nice in this one. But if you are looking for more like special shade type of shimmers, then you maybe have to dig out another palette, but for the matte quality alone, this definitely deserves to be in the sort of fall palette recommendation video. Then another palette going to the maybe end of the fall category. So this is the Jewels and Gems palette from Oden's Eye, and this is what I would say is a cool toned dream. This does have a bit like I would say like greenish leaning shades here and mauve shades here. I was really debating that is this more of a winter palette rather than a fall palette, but there is actually another Oden's Eye palette in my collection which I tend to categorize more in the winter category, and I would say that because this still has the sort of like muted browns and we have a bit of burgundy and there's like a bit of like mauves and in here, that is why I ended up thinking that yeah, this is still more what I would call like a fall palette for my preferences, and again more to the like end of the fall sort of season vibes rather than maybe to the beginning. This is beautiful palette from the brand, and especially if you're looking for generally a cool toned neutral kind of leaning palette that isn't actually like neutral but kind of initially looks a bit neutral, then this is again a good option. Then from Cosmic Brushes, which is a brand that I haven't been buying any palettes from for a while, but that's because the color stories they have come out with haven't interested me, but this is a palette that is still my favorite palette from them in terms of the color story and especially for the fall season. So this is the Muse palette, and this I think again is a palette that like you can obviously wear any of these palettes any time of the year, but I'm a person who likes to categorize my makeup seasonally, and this again gives the sort of like fall vibes with the muted greens. There is a bit of like burgundy red here, and you do have a bit of pops of color, so I do say that if you like your sort of muted colors with the pop of something brighter, this is also kind of a bit different compared to maybe some of the other palettes that I have shown. But the quality of this is beautiful. Again, this doesn't have the like the newer Cosmic Brushes palettes have a more bit like shiftier shimmers. This was from the older formula, but even though these are like more normal kind of shimmers, the shimmers are still very beautiful, and all the shimmers sort of go with the colors that are included in this one. So again, if you have been eyeing the Muse palette or you have it in your drawers, then maybe the fall time would be a good time to dig this one out. Then the two last ones I think are the ultimate fall palettes, and the first one is a palette that still has a very special place in my heart. So this is the Samarian Sunset by Adept Cosmetics. And if this doesn't scream beginning of the fall vibes, then I don't know what does. This is the most beautiful I think palette that I have in terms of like cohesive color story. The only gripe I have with this one is still that the mattes of this are very poor quality, and I haven't bought Adept palettes recently, so I don't know have they actually like developed their mattes. So the mattes are the only thing that are letting this down, but in terms of the special shimmers, this is beautiful, and this is especially now the fall season that we are entering, so soon there's gonna be like reds and yellows and bright like greens on the different kind of colors on the leaves, and this gives that vibe very heavily. And a beautiful palette. Unfortunately, I think this was a limited edition, so I don't think you're able to get this one, but if you were able to get it, this is a very good season to use it because it goes really well with the season. I mean, like, look at the packaging is also vibing with the season. Then the last and the most expensive palette probably of this, actually was the Samarian Sunset maybe, no, this was more expensive. So I think this is already like based on the cover. So this was the Harvest Moon palette from Ensley, and this is a very fall-esque. My only like gripe about this one is that in terms of the mattes, this is a bit deep. So if you want to get lighter looks, you have to pull out mattes from other palettes because all the mattes in this one are very on the sort of deeper side, so with the mattes unfortunately not that much variety, but the shimmers of this one, these are I think like ultimate. Again, this maybe goes a bit more to the like October side of things. I do think that this might be actually like purposely themed, that this could be like a Halloween palette if it's a celebration that you celebrate in your country. But this is like beautiful. It has the sort of oranges, there's yellows, there's greens, there's a bit of deep purples in this one. And again, this is one of those beautiful palettes that if you have spent the money on this one, I would like, this is now a good season to dig out and use this one. I think that I will probably, I'm not yet in the mood. I'm now, I think, as I said, in the phase of the Samarian Sunset palette in terms of color stories, but when it starts to get in darker and when the leaves have fallen off from the trees, then I'm probably gonna be digging this one out, because this is definitely like on the sort of October, end of the fall vibes for me. But if you have gotten this, this I think might still be available, but with Ensley Rain I would always make the consideration that buy the palettes that you truly think that you will use with them, because these are pretty expensive, but the quality very excellent, and I would still like recommend this one even though it's priced quite highly. But yeah, that was the sort of last fall palette recommendation I had for this video. So those are all the fall palettes that I had for this year. A bit of a disclaimer, there are some palettes that I think would maybe make it into this ranking, but because I am still in the process, I either haven't tried them out yet, they are still in my drawers unopened, or I'm currently trying them out. For example, the palette that I am currently trying, which I do think did create quite fall-esque look, is one of the PLVs, the Stack 'em Up, a smaller mini palette which is very like fall themed, but because I haven't like, because that palette is still in my rotation and a few other palettes, that's why those weren't included. So these are all the palettes that I have tried enough to sort of be able to like recommend them to you, so that is why there might be some palettes missing that you will maybe later on see on my channel. But comment down below, I would definitely want to hear what are your favorite fall palettes to use, or are you someone who just like uses their makeup just all around the year regardless of what the color story is like, because I do know that there are like different people. As I said, I'm someone who has been very always into the sort of seasonal makeup, but I do know that there are different kind of preferences to mine, and I would of course love to hear that from you guys. If you like this video, push the like button, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell button if you want to get notifications from my future content. You can also find me with the same nickname, Makeup Hedgehog, on Instagram. I hope I'll be seeing you again soon in another video. Bye bye!